Welcome to the Travelman Podcast. My name is Ben and I host this cool travel podcast. If you're joining me for the first time, then I say thanks a bunch for listening. On today's awesome episode, I'll be bringing you episode 2 of the Melbourne Travel Guide. Be sure to listen to episode 1 though before you listen to this episode. In episode 2, I'll be continuing my chat about my city, Melbourne, with Ben from Drinking History Tours, so sit back and enjoy the podcast.
That's fair enough, mate. And because you mentioned it before, what do you reckon are some of the best day trips outside of Melbourne?
Sure. I'm a sucker for history, so as you've probably guessed, mate. So I would jump on a train and head out to Ballarat, about an hour and a half northwest of the city. Ballarat used to be the centre of the gold rush back in the 1850s and 1860s. Also quite historic because it was where, well, you could argue with historians, but either Australia's only rebellion took place or, if you count the Rum Rebellion in Sydney, which I personally don't, but Australia's second rebellion where there's a great story. In 1854, the miners who were protesting gold licenses rose up and rebelled against the government and the British sent in troops to quell the rebellion, and probably the most short-lived rebellion of all time was about a 20-minute battle between miners who created a stockade and against these well-drilled British soldiers, and basically cut a swathe through, and the whole rebellion was pretty much over in about 20 minutes. And so Ballarat is beautifully preserved gold rush town, some fantastic old buildings, and then one of the main reasons you go there is there's a part of Ballarat called Sovereign Hill, which is a kind of faithfully recreation of what the town would have been like back in the 1850s and 1860s, and people are wearing period costume and you can pan for gold, and it kind of gives you a bit of a taste of what life would have been like for people on the goldfields back in the mid-19th century. And it's particularly if you've got kids, it's a great thing to take the kids to, and they can walk around the town. It's kind of educational but fun at the same time. So that's something I would I definitely check out. Moving away from the history, I mean, one of the great things that Melbourne's known for, of course, is wine. Victoria is known for its wine, and some fantastic regions to check out. There's probably two I'd really encourage people to have a look at. The first is the Yarra Valley, which is about an hour and 15 minutes northeast of the city. So the Yarra Valley is very well known for its Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, probably the two main varietals, and of course, really good sparkling wine. We can't call it champagne, obviously, because that's DOC protected, but Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, sparkling up in the Yarra Valley. So really, really close. The gateway to the Yarra Valley is a town called Healesville. So if you're looking to go there and maybe stay for a couple of days, stay in and around Healesville, and then use that as a base to explore some of the wineries, I would definitely go to Shandon, which is very, very famous for its sparkling wine. And they do fantastic charcuterie platters and cheese boards, and their sparkling is superb. Some other wineries to check out are places like St. Hubert's. Coldstream is also very good. Yarra Yering, very good. I mean, there's a ton to check out. Oh, and Giant Steps also does some fantastic wines as well. And then, of course, the other thing in Healesville to check out is a distillery called Four Pillars. And Four Pillars was I'm going to get in trouble here. I believe it was the second distillery, Australia's second gin distillery to open up. So craft gin has really exploded in the last sort of decade, and Victoria was really the kind of whiskey. The whiskey renaissance in Australia kind of started in Tasmania, but the gin renaissance started in Victoria. And so two companies in 2012 and 2013 who started that were Melbourne Gin Company and Four Pillars. And so Four Pillars, they're based in Healesville. They've got an amazing, we're going to call it a cellar door. It's not really, well, it's kind of a cellar door, but for gin. And you can try a whole bunch of their gins, everything from the stock standard kind of London Dries to some really interesting. They do this one, which they release every year, called Bloody Shiraz. Have you tried the Bloody Shiraz, mate?
I haven't, but I've tried their gin before. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So the Bloody Shiraz, Yeah, give it a go. It's the way they make this is that they make a standard gin and then they steep the gin in Shiraz grapes and they leave it for about 2 months. And then after that period, actually it might not be 2 months, it might be shorter than that, but they basically steep the grapes in gin and then they remove the grapes and the gin's absorbed all the flavours and then they cut it with a bit more gin and then they bottle it and you get this, this dark kind of purpley red coloured gin, and you can have it neat, or you could the mixer that they recommend is to have it with bitter lemon with ice, and it's a superb drink. It's just it's kind of like a slow gin. If you've tried slow gin before, it's kind of similar to that, not as bitter, and it's and they do some really cool stuff. They do a Christmas gin every year, which is made by soaking gin in Christmas pudding. Like it's just, and it tastes like Christmas pudding. It's amazing. So, Hillsville, there's a ton of stuff to do. And then, of course, the other wine region to check out is the Mornington Peninsula, which is, again, about an hour and a half southeast of the city. And, and similar to the Yarra Valley, very, very good Pinots, good Chardonnays. And it's a little bit different because it's right by the ocean. So you can grab fish and chips at, Mount Martha and then head inland and go to some of the best wineries in Victoria. Polperro, of course, you have to go to. If you go to Mornington Peninsula, you have to go to Polperro. It is, the wine is superb, but it's just a fantastic location. You can walk through the vineyards, and there's a little green space there where you can buy some food and wine and kind of sit there and look out over the vineyards. Mont Alto is also quite a well-known winery there, and there's a couple of good distilleries down that way as well. Like Chief's Son has opened up in the last couple of years. So, between those 3 day trips, you'll be kept pretty busy. Oh, and of course, the hot springs in Mornington Peninsula as well.
I was going to say
are
that.
an absolute.
Hot springs.
Oh, they're an absolute must. Did you go there and did you go up to the top one, mate? With the views. That's incredible. Yeah,
I've been there. I've been to the Peninsula Hot Springs about 3 times for 2 birthdays. Well, 3 birthdays. 2 birthdays for myself and 1 birthday for my wife.
We'll cool.
There.
Good man.
We've been there twice last year.
Yep.
And, we enjoy the drive there. We'll go to the Peninsula Hot Springs. And we also once we went to this place called the Red Gum Barbecue on Arthur's Road in Red Hill, and it's American-style barbecue. It's unbelievable.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
So delicious.
And the thing I'd say with the hot springs are they drain the pools every night and then refill them the next day. So the advice that we were given, and I would strongly recommend, is when you go, try and go first thing in the morning, because if you go in the afternoon, you're basically swimming in everyone else's soup because you've just had hundreds of people going through during the day. So, definitely go to Peninsula Hot Springs and try and get there first thing and get there for the sunrise. Like they do. Did you guys do the package where they do like the springs and then you can go and have some breakfast and first thing in the morning, do the springs.
The private one.
Yep. It's incredible.
Get your breakfast. You got that private little area that's only for people that have paid extra, and then you've got the other large area which is for everyone else. Yeah. And I think they're going to have accommodation soon there too. They've just been building
I heard that. I haven't heard any updates on that. They were going to do accommodation, but I haven't heard anything
and stuff.
Yeah, which is going to be ace. I can't wait for that. But it's a if you're heading down that way, it's a must do.
Yeah, they got like a Turkish bath in there, an hammam or whatever you call it.
Yeah, that's right, the hammam.
There's an ice room.
Yep.
There's everything, and there's different pools depending on different heats. Like it goes up to about 41 or 42 degrees.
That's right.
It goes all the way down to 26, I think, degrees. Yeah, but they've done a great job.
Yeah, and I think I'd say as well, because the public area is open for kids as well as adults. Now, if you like, well, we've got a kid now, so we fall into that category. But before then, we hated. Well, not hated, but it was annoying because you had these like 10-year-olds. And they just wouldn't shut up while we're trying to enjoy this beautiful sunrise. So there's like adults only sections. Adults only kind of sounds a bit risque and a bit sexy, but it's literally just a place where children can't go, and then you just don't have to be annoyed by screaming children at this beautiful, pristine kind of calm area. So if you are the kind of person that does get easily annoyed by children, I would recommend looking into paying that bit extra so you can get some peace and serenity.
Yeah, definitely. That adult area is that kind of private area, I think. I think kids aren't allowed in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, and it's worth paying the extra.
Pay the
What,
extra.
$16 for?
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. I've got a few other things that are really cool day trips from Melbourne. The Werribee Mansion.
Oh, yep. Out west. Yep.
Out west, which has the mansion and the gardens. They've got exhibitions there. And it's really cool. It's close to the Werribee Open Range Zoo. So if you've ever done an open range zoo, then the Werribee Open Range Zoo is pretty cool.
We did that last year before, and they've got a thing where you can do glamping inside the zoo. So you pay this package and you stay in these kind of, I mean, they are proper glamping tents. Like they're not tents; they're beautiful kind of accommodation. But you're sleeping inside the open range zoo, and you're like, you're falling asleep to the sound of like lions and tigers, and it's kind of wild. Wow. And then you get dinner there that night, and then they take you on a walk to some of the more historic parts of the zoo, because it used to be a shearing station back in the day, and they've kept some of the old shearing sheds. Yeah, and then the package also includes a trip, like a guide through the zoo, and you get to, like when we did it, I think it changes which kind of animals you get to meet. But when we went there, we got to pat a rhino, which was unreal. And then we also got to meet a cheetah, which you're not allowed to touch the cheetahs because they're a bit unpredictable. But exactly, yeah. And I had no idea. Like the zookeepers were telling us that cheetahs are actually some of the most inbred animals in the world. Like the genetic difference between cheetahs, no matter where they are, is like it's like less. I mean, I'll be corrected, but it's like less than 5%. Like they're actually quite inbred creatures. So breeding them is actually quite tricky because you need to try and find mates that have enough of a difference that you're not going to get strange, weird little cheetah children. But anyway, I'm getting off track. But I guess to your point, mate, that open range zoo is an incredible experience. So definitely worth checking out.
I think cheetahs once upon a time came from Tasmania and swam to Adelaide.
Is that right?
Apparently.
Yeah, right. Okay. There's
I'm waiting for the
good
hate
one.
mail now.
That sounds like a tour guide fact, mate.
Oh, God. Yep. I'm sorry, people from Tasmania and Adelaide. I do not mean that. I'm only joking. Another place, Phillip Island's a good day trip, especially if you like a bit of a surf. And
and of course, very famous for the penguins. Yep.
Very famous for the penguins. Great place. But that's probably a longer day trip. That's a good couple of hours away from Melbourne CBD.
Yep. And look, one thing I say to people, look, I mean, the penguin colony at Phillip Island is pretty spectacular. But if you want a shortcut and you're not prepared to jump in a car for 2.5 hours, you can actually, well, not all the time, but in St Kilda, which is just south of the city, and I say it's our best beach, which is kind of a bit of a long draw given that Melbourne doesn't really have any good beaches. But St Kilda is about as well. I suppose Brighton Beach is probably as good as it gets, and St Kilda is not far behind. But at the end of St Kilda Pier, there's a beautiful old cafe, and then behind the cafe there's like a rocky kind of alcove. And if you go there at dusk, you can often find penguins within those rocks. Sort of just playing and swimming and that kind of thing. So we're not talking like hundreds of like a colony of penguins, but it's often if you're desperate to see penguins in the wild, you can often see them in St Kilda just at the end of the pier instead of driving all the way to Phillip Island.
Oh well, that's really good inside information that only a proper Melburnian would be able to give you. Not all
the time, but it's because I'm putting some asterisks on this inside, but but I think it's worth checking out because St Kilda's so close, and you can get there by public transport. There's other reasons to go to St Kilda other than trying to see penguins. I mean, the bars are fantastic. There's some really good restaurants down that way. It's got a very kind of beachy, summery vibe in St Kilda. Very, very popular with backpackers and tourists. And so I think the point is if you're in St Kilda, definitely go to the end of the pier at dusk and see if you get lucky.
Yes, no, that's fair enough. And if you are doing day trips, obviously you've got to stay in Melbourne somewhere. Have you got any places or suburbs or parts of the CBD which you would say, I would stay here because this is a good location to do your day trips, to do your touring of Melbourne, so forth?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that the city, Melbourne CBD has a lot of sort of 3, 4-star accommodation. So there's plenty of hotels that are reasonably affordable within the CBD itself. I would try and get an Airbnb in Fitzroy. I reckon that would be the perfect place to base yourself, and then Fitzroy is just north of the city, so you can walk from Fitzroy down to the city and explore. And then, of course, you're in Fitzroy, and you can explore that wonderful place because there's lots of really cool loft conversions in Fitzroy and some beautiful old terrace buildings. So it's a really cool place. If you can find one of those Airbnbs that is in one of those beautiful old historical buildings, it's a really unique, cool experience. Some other suburbs that are worth checking out for, not so much for hotels. I'm thinking more just in terms of suburbs. If you can find a good Airbnb, I think Richmond in the east has, again, it's quite historic and a lot of activity and nightlife and things happening. And again, very close to the city, you can jump on a tram and be in the city in sort of 10 minutes or so. South Melbourne, I think, is another great place where there's some beautiful old homes that are. I'm sure there's a ton of Airbnb stock there as well. So I think outside the city, South Bank has some great accommodation as well. I mean, if you're prepared to loosen the purse strings a bit, you could always stay at Crown and have a really nice suite there overlooking the city, and then use that as a bit of a base to get out. But I think that's probably more of a special occasion, or if you want to stay, or if you want to stay at a place, the Langham on South Bank, which is
that's it's kind of this hotel.
It's beautiful. Oh, it's like Italian 8, and it's like over the top, and it's all marble finishings, and it's kind of they do a cracking all you can eat. Actually, just that jogged my memory. The Langham, I think they still do this. They do like a Sunday all you can eat seafood buffet with champagne. I haven't checked out in a while if it's still going, but it's worth Googling to see if they still do it, because it used to be amazing. And you can then walking through the Langham itself is quite an experience. It's quite a beautiful hotel, and then you can have a seafood feast while you're overlooking the city. It's pretty cool.
Would you stay in Carlton if you're
I think we were talking before. The centre of the Italian community in Melbourne, and again, I think, and beyond restaurants, Carlton's got some fantastic wine bars. Not so much bars and pubs in Carlton. There are definitely a few, but I think it's probably it's more of a restaurant kind of scene. But again, not that dissimilar to Fitzroy. Actually, both kind of former working class suburbs that have long since been gentrified. But a lot of that beautiful old housing stock still remains. And I think, again, one of the benefits with Carlton, you stay there and you're so close to the city that it makes it easy to to jump on a tram or a taxi, and then easier to get away for some of those day trips as well.
Absolutely. And I would say, if you're a backpacker, stay in St Kilda. If you're a younger person, I wouldn't advise families to stay in St Kilda, but if you're a young person and you want to have a bit of fun, you could try that. But part of me thinks St Kilda's still really bloody dodgy.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde suburb. I don't know. I don't want to rag on my city, but I think, look, St Kilda in the wintertime is not the most fun place to visit. Even a lot of the bars and restaurants in St Kilda don't open during the winter months, and then they're just shuttered because there's just not enough people coming through to justify being open. But I think in the summertime, on a Sunday afternoon, you go to places like the Prince on Fitzroy Street, or the Espy has just reopened. So the Esplanade Hotel, which is a iconic live music venue in St Kilda, which has been and they've been closed for ages. They only reopened, I think it was last year, after being closed for the better part of they were closed for a good 18, 24 months. but
Not
beautifully.
get burned?
Yeah, no, it might have. Yeah, my memory's failing me now, but I think there might have been a fire at the SB, and then they used it to do a massive renovation, and it's.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
it is superb now. So, and then you head down Ackland Street, and there's some beautiful old German bakeries like Monarch, and places to drink like Vineyard or Big Mouth. There's some really good places down there. So I think if you stick, it's kind of like saying, if you stick to these two streets, you'll be fine. Like if you stick to Fitzroy, but even having said that, even parts of Fitzroy, can be a little bit dodgy. But I think,
true.
I think generally speaking, I mean, there's probably the eastern part of St Kilda is I'd argue, kind of richer, slightly better off part of St Kilda, and then which is St Kilda East is quite close to a suburb called Balaclava, which is home to a lot of old Orthodox Jewish families, which is quite a wealthy area. But I love the fact that St Kilda has a bit of dirt under its nails. It isn't like Fitzroy's old and beautiful and historic, but it's got edge, but in some ways it almost feels like contrived edge. Like you're not really going to find much danger in Fitzroy these days. Like whereas in St Kilda.
Yeah.
Like, you're not that you're going to go there looking for trouble, but, like you're right. There are some parts of St Kilda you probably want to avoid. And, there's parts of St Kilda where there are drug addicts and streetwalkers and things like that. And not to scare people off, but that's the reality. But that's kind of why I like it. I like the fact that you've got these amazing hotels and bars and, you're right by the beach and, it's a great place to go there. And when the sun's setting. But then there's also, like a couple of streets away, places you don't necessarily want to go to. So I don't know. I like my places with a bit of edge.
Yeah, I must admit, whenever I'm traveling overseas, I don't mind to stay somewhere with a bit of an edge. In relation to keeping safe in Melbourne, Melbourne's a pretty safe place. So unless you're out really late at night or you're in the wrong spot, I mean, you should be fine.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, look, within the city, I think, the only street that I'd probably avoid is King Street. And I mean, that's probably more the south end of King Street more than the north end. But the south end, there's a couple of inappropriately named gentlemen's clubs, which get a bit hazy on the early Saturday, well, so I'd say early Saturday morning or early Sunday morning, depending on your point of view. So they're probably, but then again, it annoys me because King Street also has some fantastic bars like, it's just recently reopened last year. There's a really good rooftop bar on the south end of King Street, which I've now forgotten. So,
look to the show notes, people, because Ben and I can't remember crap.
I'm giving all these fantastic. State of Grace, that's what I'm thinking of. State of Grace.
State of Grace.
You don't have to look to the show notes. Yeah, State of Grace used to be on Collins Street, and then they moved to south end of King Street. And there's State of Grace is quite cool. There's an amazing rooftop bar, and then downstairs there's a secret hidden bar called Fall from Grace, where you need to pull a book back on a bookshelf, kind of like Bruce Wayne and Batman, kind of accessing the bunker, and then the door slides open, and then you go downstairs, and there's a really cool hidden bar downstairs. So Melbourne used to have a ton of these like kind of secret speakeasies, but there aren't that many anymore. There's only really a couple that I know of. But so State of Grace is actually it's actually worth going to King Street for State of Grace. It is. I've been there for a couple of lunches recently, and it is a really, really cool venue. So yeah, I don't think you need to necessarily avoid King Street, but you just like don't be on King Street at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning would be my advice.
And I just thought of a cool bar that the tourist or traveller can go to, and it's right in the middle of town. It's called Beneath Driver Lane. It's probably my favourite cocktail bar.
Yep, just behind the GPO. Amazing.
Yep. Best espresso martinis.
Oh, I'd say one of the best, if not the best, cocktail / spirits bar in Melbourne. It is absolutely superb.
And you know what? It's totally empty at 5 p.m. on a Sunday when I go.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yep. No, it's really cool.
No one wants to drink at 5 p.m. on a Sunday.
and it's one of those places. It's not even a lot of Melburnians know about because it's sort of it's tucked away down a laneway, and it's not
True.
Immediately obvious how to even get in there when you're sort of walking down there. Very few bars give you that kind of wow moment when you walk through the door, but East Driver Lane definitely has that thing when you walk in. It's like, wow, this is what you see pictures of it, and then you walk in like, oh no, this actually is better than what it was on the review.
Well, it's an old bank vault, and then you walk down this set of stairs, and the door opens itself. There's cobwebs, there's old candles that have melted down to the ground. Kind of looks like an old scary bunker where Frankenstein used to cut people up and put them back together, something like that. It's very strange, but I love it. I love that weird feeling.
Yeah, gothic. Yeah, it's kind of got a gothic feel.
Yeah. This should be like the Melbourne drinking guide.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I was going to say, if I've got to give my business a plug. If readers want to learn more about some of Melbourne's best bars, we've actually got some guides on my website, drinkinghistorytours.com, where we've listed our favourite 3 bars for each type of genre. So, favourite 3 cocktail bars, favourite 3 rooftop bars, favourite 3 whiskey bars, gin bars, etc. So, if you're looking for some tips and some really quick guides, then check out the website.
Okay, so tell me some things that may surprise you about Melbourne, Ben.
All right. One thing that certainly surprised me was Melbourne has. Melbourne is a fantastic melting pot of lots of different cultures, and a lot of people associate the city with fantastic Italian food, like we've spoken about with Lygon Street, or Greek food. There's a really strong. Melbourne's actually got the second biggest Greek community outside of Greece. The Chinese community. But one thing that may surprise you, there's actually quite a large Ethiopian community in Melbourne as well, mostly based out in the west. And so in Footscray, which I guess, for lack of a better term, is the sort of the capital of the inner west of Melbourne, along the main strip there, Barclay Street, there's a couple of fantastic Ethiopian restaurants. And one of my favourites is a place called Abisha, or Abishas, but Google that. And they're such a nondescript kind of looking restaurant. Like, you walk past it and it's never busy. There's never more than like 2 or 3 people inside. And we got this tip from my wife's cousin who lives in West Footscray, and she said to us, "You've got to go to this place. It looks like shit, but the food is incredible, and the people are so friendly and lovely." And so we went there for a date night, and we walked in. We're like, "Oh my god, what have we walked into?" Like, it's weird. There's all these kind of Ethiopian runner posters on the wall, and it's just kind of a weird. But anyway, you sit down, and they're so lovely. And inside the restaurant, there's a poster of the owners with Hugh Jackman and Deborah Lee Furness. And we were eating there for a little bit, and we'd gone back there a couple of times, and eventually we sort of got up the courage and we said, "Sorry, can we just ask, like, why have you got how do you know Hugh Jackman?" And they said to us that when Hugh Jackman had been to Ethiopia, or he just loves Ethiopian food, and apparently he was coming to Melbourne. This is years and years ago, and he was coming to Melbourne, and he sent one of his gophers out to find, the best Ethiopian in Melbourne, so he could eat there. And one of his gopher came to Abisha and loved the food, and then approached them and said, "Oh, look, I represent Mr. Jackman. I'd love to invite you to come and cook for him, because Hugh Jackman can't just walk into a restaurant." So the owners were asked if they would come to his hotel and cook a meal for him and his wife, and so they did. I'm not sure where he was staying, but probably at the Langham actually. And so they went and cooked him a Ethiopian meal, and yeah, they took a photo, and it's now hanging proudly on the wall. So, there's some other fantastic Ethiopian places besides Abisha, but we're loyal. Like, we've been to one other Ethiopian restaurant since, I can't remember the name, and the food was great, but we felt like we were cheating. So I think we went back to Abisha's the next week, and we're like, we didn't tell them. We felt like apologising, like, we're sorry, we stepped out. But yeah, it was one thing that surprised me, that there'd just be this place, places that just have incredible Ethiopian food. And if you've never had Ethiopian food before, I guess the closest parallel would probably be kind of Indian, I suppose. Like they do a lot of really good curry dishes, and it's and everything's served on this spongy type of bread, and you basically tear the bread off, and you and you use that to kind of scoop up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So if it's worth a trip out to Footscray and go to a Beaches, and the other great thing about a Beaches is the drinks are really cheap, and they also sell Ethiopian beer, which was something I'd just never been exposed to before. I think it's St. George's beer. So yeah, really, really good. Like apparently, the Ethiopian beer is actually known for being quite high quality. So again, stuff I didn't know before, but yeah, check it out. It's worth a trip out to Footscray. But that was something I found quite surprising.
Do you think a tourist would find Melbourne expensive?
Yeah, look, I mean, Australia in general is expensive, right? Like we are the Scandinavia of the Southern Hemisphere, so I think.
Yeah, true.
Look, the feedback I get from tourists traveling around Australia is that it's not as expensive as Sydney, but it's obviously more expensive than Adelaide or Brisbane, right? So, but I think the thing with Melbourne is there's a lot of, I mean, if you want to have cheap eats, there are places where you can, get really affordable food. If you want to do cultural things, there's lots of free museums. I mean, the NGV is free. There's also NGV, the Ian Potter Centre inside Federation Square, and that's free. So there's lots of free things to do in the city, and there's enough bars around that the alcohol isn't as expensive as it probably could be. I mean, there's a fantastic bar in the middle of the Yarra called Ponyfish Island. I don't know, you've probably been there a few times, Benny.
Yeah, and I took my mate there from overseas. He loved it.
Oh, it's a great, and I think they sell long necks for like $8-9 a pop. Like it's it's super cheap, right? So there are places like that, and so I think you can make Melbourne what you make of it. You can have a cheaper experience if you want to, and then look, if you want to splurge and go big. And the other thing, of course, we haven't spoken about is the sport in Melbourne, right? Like sport is our religion, and the MCG is our cathedral. We'll talk about cathedrals. We should have mentioned the MCG first, mate, not St. Pat's or St. Paul's, but
MCG.
Yeah, but the great thing with the MCG is it's I lived in London for about a year and a half, and going to see an EPL game there would minimum set you back 40-50 quid more, whereas you can go and see a game at the MCG in general admission, and it'll cost you $25-30, right? So I think Melburnians complain about the cost of the food at the MCG and all that stuff, and they're all valid complaints. But at the end of the day, if you compare the food and the ticket prices at the MCG to almost any other sporting experience around the world, it is still cheap. So to be able to go to one of the world's great stadiums, I mean, the MCG is the 10th largest sporting stadium in the world. To be able to go there and sit down with 90, 99, 100,000 people to watch the greatest sport ever invented, AFL, to have a beer in your hand, meat pie in the other, it is one of those experiences that you just have to do.
Quintessential Melbourne.
It's quintessential Melbourne, right? Like, and if you're lucky enough to be here during the winter months when the footy's on, there's plenty of games on. There'll be 2 or 3 games in Melbourne every weekend. Tickets aren't that expensive, and it is just something that has to be done for anyone who comes to Melbourne. So, if you're here in the summer months, you obviously get the benefit of being here during the festival season. And if you're here in the winter months, you're here for footy. And there's I think Melbourne without footy in the winter would be a very depressing place sometimes. But luckily we've got this bright spark of the footy every weekend to to look forward to.
And if you want to barrack for a team and you're coming to Melbourne for the first time, you can barrack for Collingwood.
Oh, Ben, I didn't realise you're a Pies fan, mate. I never would have agreed to do this podcast.
I love it.
For listeners who aren't Australian, obviously, Collingwood is a team widely known as being supported by, how would you say it, Benny? The
biggest ferals in the world.
The lower socioeconomic aspects of Melbourne, I think, to be polite.
Absolutely.
I suppose you'd say they're the Manchester United of AFL for, I guess, a shit comparison, but kind of the same thing. Just everyone loves
Pretty
to hate
much.
Collingwood, and but huge
Exactly.
supporter base. 100,000 members you've got now, 90,000
Probably
members,
something like
incredible.
that. It'd be close
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Be like Richmond, I think, similar.
Being a Collingwood fan, mate, we can talk about the grand final a couple of years ago. My boys, West Coast.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Do we not want to talk about that?
It's
okay,
all
no,
good.
we can talk about it off mic.
That last kick.
My boy Dom Sheed, I was right behind him.
Changing the subject. Love it. You guys deserved it, whatever. Anyway, final questions, Ben.
Do it, mate.
Do you like how I did that?
Very good. Good segue.
Thank you, sir. If you could travel anywhere in the world now, where would you like to go or be?
I would love to travel back to Spain, I think. I lived in Spain for 3 months in the northwest of the country in a place called Salamanca, where I did some Spanish classes. And
oh, wow.
Don't ask me to speak Spanish now because for any Spanish speakers, it's caca en la boca. It's not good these days. But, I just love Spain. I love the vibe. I love the food, particularly southern Spain. Places like Granada, Cadiz are beautiful. So I think I'd love to go back to southern Spain and spend some time in Sevilla, Granada, and drink good wine, eat good food, and just enjoy the lifestyle. It's one of my favourite places in the world. That or Greece. I spent 3 months tour guiding in Greece, and Santorini and Paros are two of my favourite places in the world. And again, similar reasons, right? The amazing food, amazing drink, and just the lifestyle and the way that the Greeks approach the whole philosophy of they're not living to work, they're working to live. It's a bit of a cliche, but you get there and you really see it in action. They just life is about living. It's not for and you come back to Australia and you try and live that mentality. You think, I'm not gonna worry so much about climbing the corporate ladder, or I'm going to have a different mentality. But of course, you get sucked back into it within a few weeks. But I think Spain and Greece are two of my happiest places on earth.
Cool. Yeah, I love Greece. Haven't been to Spain. That's still somewhere I would love to go in my life. I'll get there one day.
Plenty of time.
So there is plenty of time. That's true. And what would you be eating or drinking? Now, you don't have to be eating or drinking Spanish food.
What would I be eating or drinking? I'd probably be eating a giant pork knuckle with potato dumplings. Again, a happy memory from going to Oktoberfest, sitting in the Eureka Gardens and having like a knuckle the size of my head, just staring at me, daring me to eat the whole thing, which of course I did. So that would be probably what I'm eating. Drinking, probably a really good French red. I think like something from Bordeaux. I think would be quite lovely. I don't know whether a Bordeaux red actually probably would go well with a pork knuckle, but it's probably what comes to mind straight away.
Okay, and have you got a favourite country and city?
I used to get asked this all the time when I was a tour guide. I think favourite big city, and look, it's a cliche, but Paris, right? Like, the reason I say Paris is simple. You'll know this as well as I do, mate. When you travel for the first time, it's like falling in love. You've got the butterflies, and you get to the city, and it's all new and exciting, and it's just I can't believe what I'm doing. And then the more you travel, that feeling of wonder, it never goes away, but it diminishes a little bit over time. You never can quite recapture that feeling of being in a place for the first time and feeling that sense of wonder. But Paris is one of those cities, because when I was a tour guide, I used to go through Paris once every couple of weeks and stay there for a couple of nights and then before moving on. And cool. Paris was always one place I never lost that sense of wonder. Like, I used to do night tours through Paris back in the day, and you'd be going past the Grand Palais and the Petit Palais, and then you'd be up in the northern part of the city and through Montmartre and going past the Eiffel Tower and up the Champs-Élysées, and it just never grew old. Other cities I'd go to, and I'm like, I could kind of do this with my eyes closed. But Paris was always one where I was genuinely excited to go back there. So Paris, probably favourite big city. As for favourite small city, there's a cracking city in Slovenia called Ljubljana. And Slovenia is one of these interesting countries where it's a bit of a cliche where in Europe, the furthest south you go, and this is more what Northern Europeans will say. The further south you go, the lazier people get, and of course, the further north you go, according to Southern Europeans, all they care about is work, and they're just all blockheads, and and I think between those two poles is Slovenia, and Slovenia's they've kind of got that German work ethic, but then they love alfresco dining, and there's really good food, and it's a beautiful. It's kind of a Habsburg kind of era city, and there's a beautiful triple bridge that goes across the river, and it just my wife and I spent a good 9 months traveling through Europe, and probably spent about 2 months traveling through Eastern Europe, 3 months, and we sort of had no real expectations about a lot of the places we went to in Eastern Europe, but then we got to Slovenia and we just fell in love with the place. Like we ended up skydiving over Lake Bled and just having the most amazing time there. It was just, I'm actually struggling to try and articulate why I loved it so much, but just a beautiful city, great feeling and atmosphere, very pretty, and just just all the things a good city should have. If you ever get a chance, or your listeners ever get a chance, don't overlook Slovenia as part of your travels. It's you'll be very happily surprised.
Does get overlooked quite a lot. My wife's Croatian, so we tend to overlook it all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Croatia, Dubrovnik is amazing. And, it's not far away, actually, Croatia from
next.
So right next door, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it is. It is right next door. Have you got a favourite country?
Favourite country? Look, besides Spain and Greece, I think I worked in Greece for 3 months, and then I lived in Spain for 3 months, and they'll always kind of, a part of me will always be with those countries. Outside of those two, probably not often a popular choice, but I really love the UK. Like, I loved my time living in London, and I was lucky enough to do a bit of travelling around. So I was based in London when I was there, but I managed to get around and do some trips to places like Oxford and Cambridge, and Bath was another place I went to, and I just had a great time there. Look, the weather's terrible. I'm not even going to debate that as a factor, but I don't know. I had a really, really good time there, and I'm always kind of sad to hear people describe their travels and say, "Oh yeah, we went to London for 2 days, and I just hated it. I didn't enjoy it." And I just feel like saying, "Yeah, but did you know? Like, did you know what you were doing? Like, did you go to borough markets, or did you actually go to some of these cool places that really make London what it is?" And I think it's a fair observation to say that London is a better place to live in than it is to travel to. But I always say you've got to give London a good sort of 5 or 6 days if you're just going to travel there, because it is easy to get there and kind of get, it's cold and miserable, and we've seen Big Ben, we've seen Parliament, okay, we're done, But it's an easy one to overlook. So I think UK is always going to have a place, and I suppose England now we should call it, because it's all going to break up pretty soon when Scotland and Wales decide to pull stumps and leave the union. But probably another one of my favourites.
Fair enough. And what's the country or city you choose that surprised you the most?
Outside of Slovenia, actually, you know what? The one of the cities that surprised me the most the first time I went there was Amsterdam, because I think for anyone who's never been to Amsterdam, you obviously know about the red light district and about the quote cafes unquote, and the coffee shops I should say, and you kind of have an impression of going to Amsterdam where it's going to be a bit I don't know, like a bit druggy or a bit kind of dirty, and then of course you get to Amsterdam and it's beautiful, like the canals, and there's cafes and restaurants lining the canals, and there's some really cool museums, and the bars are amazing. And there are some seedy parts inside the red light district itself in Dublin, but it's actually, and I used to get this all the time from passengers that they'd always be like, "Wow, I thought Amsterdam was going to be dirty." And I'm like, well, there are parts of it, but but the city is actually beautiful and clean and really, really attractive. So I think Amsterdam was one of those places that's that if you go in there with a preconceived notion, it will surprise you a lot. The Berlin, I think, was surprising, and Berlin's surprising for how spread out it is. I mean, it's actually, again, because of the divide between West and East, the city is incredibly decentralized. And the other thing with Berlin is it's cheap. You'd expect for a major European power, especially Germany, given it's sort of the powerhouse of the European economy, you'd really expect Berlin to be more akin to a Paris, just in how expensive it is. But it's a really cheap city. Like beers are really cheap, and you can eat really cheaply, and accommodation is actually not that expensive. And it's not like Berlin is a big alpha European city, but it's actually a lot cheaper than you might think. I mean, I haven't been to Berlin in quite a few years, so it may have got a bit more expensive since. But yeah, that was one thing that did surprise me when I was going through Berlin.
Berlin's awesome. One of my favorite German cities, Berlin and Munich.
Oh, Munich's cool. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Did you go there for Oktoberfest?
I was there. I had to fly out 2 days before Oktoberfest for a wedding in Croatia back in 2006. So I've never been there for Oktoberfest, but I was close enough. I've done all the beer halls and I'm eating the big pretzels. The pretzels that are as big as your hand or even bigger. Drunk heaps of beer there. No, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And I think, I mean, the experience of going to like the Hofbrauhaus or the Löwenbräu or Augustina, right. The experience of Oktoberfest is like a step up from going to those beer halls. It is quite unique when you're in the Oktoberfest grounds. And it's, one of my friends described it as Disneyland for adults. And it's probably the best way to think of it. It's once a lifetime experience. You probably only unless you're a massive beer fan, you probably only need to go once. I'd say it is one of those once in a lifetime experiences. But I think you probably don't need to go more than once. But go for a good 3-4 days if you do go.
Fair enough. And what I've really enjoyed today was speaking to you, Ben.
Oh, thanks, Ben. I've enjoyed speaking to you as well.
And I might crack open a beer now.
I've finished a whiskey as we were talking, mate. So I'm going to pour myself another one before I go to bed.
Good man. Good man. I've really enjoyed having you on. There's so much we could cover about Melbourne, which I feel like we haven't covered. So yeah, I might have to get you back on to do more Melbourne. But the Melbourne Travel Guide.
We could do a part 2, mate.
We'll do a part 2 at some stage. That would be amazing. Yep. But I really appreciate you coming on, Bud. And how can people contact you if they want to contact you?
Yeah, so for anyone who wants to reach out, you can reach out to me at bentheboss@drinkinghistorytours.com. Obviously drop me a line if you want to come and do one of our tours, but if you want to just drop me a line and say good day, and if you want any tips on Melbourne or bars or just anything in general, more than happy to shoot through some advice. So yeah, don't feel like you need to get in contact just to do a tour. And of course the website itself, drinkinghistorytours.com, where you can see all of our tour dates and everything else.
So all the hate mail goes to Ben the Boss at
Yep. Yep. All of that, and I mean, my filters must be working because I haven't received any emails from you so far, mate. So they're obviously turned on properly.
And if anyone wants to contact me, I'm all over the internet. Put Travelman Podcast in. You'll find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm everywhere. Travelmanpodcast.com. Travelmanpodcast@gmail.com is my email. And thank you very much, Ben, for coming on the podcast. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, how much time you got just off mic for a second, Ben?
Maybe a little bit long. I'm starting to fade, actually, mate, if I'm being totally honest. Are there some stuff you want to... I'm like here the clock going, fuck, we've been talking for an hour and 23 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
No, pleasure, mate. I'm probably I'm right at the end of my mental my mental thought processes. But no, it was a lot of fun, mate. I was really glad to be on.